Hello, my name is Robert Joyner. In this tutorial, I will discuss some mixed media techniques while painting this horse racing painting you see here. My objectives are to give you some ideas on how to incorporate compressed charcoal and acrylic inks into your work, how to make your subjects more interesting by drawing and painting them, to give you my idea of just my philosophy of painting by using the 2-to-1 ratio. This formula is basically how I balance the abstract and representational qualities. Using large areas of light and darks to create a center of focus. How to use opaque colors to define lost shapes, and then using a palette knife to scratch back into wet paint. The materials I'm using are the 500 series Strathmore premium artboard, a very thick and durable painting surface, acrylic paint, acrylic inks, compressed charcoal, synthetic brushes, and a palette knife. The palette I have chosen is phthalo blue, Australian green gold. When mixed with white, that will create a bright yellow. Magenta, olive green, and titanium white. The brushes will be a number 12 round, a number 4 flat, and a 1-inch square brush. The acrylic inks that I'll be using will be the bright red, Prussian blue, and sepia. That covers the materials. Let's go ahead and get to the next step, and that's starting the painting. Here I have a 22 by 30, again, Strathmore premium artboard. It is dry, untreated, and I am using thinned layers or watered down layers of brown. I got the brown by mixing the magenta and the Australian green gold. I will also point out this tip: when you start a painting, it pretty much sets the tone for the entire piece. If you're trying to paint loosely and abstractly, then use very large, bold strokes. I mean, it's really a time to go for it. You don't want to be timid at this point. Go ahead and get your color down, get the energy going in the right direction, and I think you'll like the results of having that already on your surface when you go to your middle and later stages. I am taking that watered down mixture and I'm adding a touch of magenta just to get a variety of brown. And I'm just going to go ahead and start to define where some of these jockeys will be as well. So just laying down a little bit of color um, to just so I can kind of start to get the composition to make sense, and I kind of start to know where to go next. And I'm also cognizant, to not paint every square inch of my subject. I just want to hit bits and pieces and leave areas unpainted, um, so that I can come in later with a charcoal or crayon to start, to define some of those areas that haven't been touched yet. My idea for painting is again to create abstract brushwork, so very loose and bold brushwork. When you view it up close, it's very loose and it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But when you back up from the painting, it somehow holds together in the subject. You can start to visualize. And I'll talk a little more about that in a moment. So now I'm introducing the compressed charcoal, and you see I'm starting to create details and through lines um, for my subject. So I'm creating an arm, and I'm defining some features like a nostril, and some areas that I really didn't do it all with the paint. So by leaving these areas unpainted, I now have the opportunity to define some of those by using charcoal. So keep that in mind as you start to put your initial colors down, is to leave some of those areas unpainted so that you can allow the opportunity for another medium to kind of finish what you didn't do. So, and that's kind of how my thoughts are on using charcoal for this particular piece. So again, allowing room for your initial wash and your initial color, so that you can come back with charcoal or crayon if you decide that you want to use color. You don't necessarily have to use charcoal. All of these are just suggestions and materials that I'm accustomed to working with and I'm comfortable with. So explore a little bit. I'm excited to see what you come up with, okay? So we're just going to go up close so you kind of start to see what I'm talking about with the abstract quality. So these brush strokes make no sense at all. When you're talking about painting a horse and a jockey, it's actually almost comical to think that that can be considered a horse. But the idea is to get that abstract brushwork in there in the beginning, and then I'm using the charcoal lines to actually pull those random brush strokes together. So the combination of the two, starts to create a subject, and it kind of holds everything together. So you know, um, it's just kind of how I like to think when I'm painting and creating. Is loose abstract brushwork, but yet enough detail to where it holds together when you view it from a distance. So now I'm just strengthening the browns on the horses were very like one tone, so I'm just introducing some very heavy darks here, to create a center of interest. So if I left everything one tone, then a lot of times the viewer will be a little confused as to where to look. There's really nothing drawing their eye into any area of the painting. So by creating these rich, deep, dark tones, you're now pulling the eye in that direction. And I'm also mixing the dark areas. So I'm using thick opaque paint to create thicker and rich colors. And then I'm also taking that mixture and thinning it out with water. And I'm creating dark tones, but I'm using more of a transparent layer to achieve it. So it's nice to mix up your light and dark areas. So you have opaque light areas mixed with transparent light areas, and the same goes for the darks as I demonstrated here. Now that you can see these, where I've used thin layers of paint, a lot of these shapes of the horses and jockeys have been lost. So I'm using opaque or the titanium white. I'm using the opaque quality of the white to redefine some of the shapes I've lost. So maybe you can do this at any stage of a painting. If you feel like there are certain areas of your subject that you feel like you could define or you think need that definition, then feel free to do it. You don't necessarily have to do it in the beginning stages or where I'm doing it, but always remember that's in your back pocket, to use white mixed with any color as opaque, or you can use white by itself, and if you drag it into wet colors, it's going to create a soft tone for you as well. Um, you know Whenever you're working with white, and don't mix it too much with all the other colors too, because you can really muddy a painting fast. So the idea is just to hit and miss. You don't want again, every square inch to be defined. Allow those areas to be to kind of be loose, and let the viewers kind of use their imagination a little bit when they view it as well. So now I'm using the palette knife to scratch back into some of those areas of dark brown, and that reveals the layers underneath. So as long as you scratch back into wet paint, you're going to show what's underneath it. And if this dries, if you're trying to scratch back into dry paint, of course that that won't work at all. Because you can't really scratch back into it, so you could actually pull the paint off the canvas, or cut your canvas that way, or damage it. So be sure if you're scratching back into the paint, use a wet layer, And that's really nice too, because you can reveal what's underneath it. So if you have a very colorful underpainting, you come over with a very dark color and you scratch into it, then it's going to reveal all those bright colors underneath. So that's really a nice way to add some random linear interest to your work. And so have fun exploring that as well. Now I'm just building the painting up a little bit, just touching some areas that have been lost, and you don't want to do too much at this stage. The idea is just to maybe um, strengthen the feeling of light and shadow. So if I know the light is coming in from the left-hand side, then everything on the right is going to be dark. So you can kind of maybe strengthen some dark areas, build that up a little bit, which is what I'm doing. And then, pretty much when I have it at this stage, I'll just let the painting dry. Um, and I think that's important too, because when you let something dry, then you come back later, then you have a fresh set of eyes, and then you've also let the work that you've done up to that point kind of blend and digest a little bit, and then kind of come back and look at and formulate a kind of a game plan, if you will, on how to finish it. And so for me, this painting was dry, and now I'm using my sepia acrylic ink to build up some of those layers of brown. So I felt like the brown was a little too, even though I had the darks in there, I wanted to build up those middle tones a little bit by using transparent ink. And that's the beauty of ink too, is it's transparent. So if you're using relatively thin layers of it, you can add nice pops of color, and you can build up areas of color without covering up what is already there. So it's a nice way to create layers in your work. And in this case, I'll go ahead and use some red and strengthen this magenta. And this is the bright red acrylic ink, so it adds a really nice touch of color. And if you have like reject paintings, or if you have a painting that you just is very dull and you're not happy with, use some of this acrylic ink. Just put it down on a painting that again appears just very flat, and you'll be very surprised at the results. These inks are a fabulous tool to pump some energy into your work, and it's a great way to revitalize works you're not very happy with. So just kind of spreading that red around a little bit, just trying to blend it really, so it's not just in one area, but not too much. You don't want to go overboard with it to where the whole painting is so colorful that it just almost becomes distracting. So now I'm using the blue acrylic ink just to add touches of nice rich blue in there, and using some thinned out layers to just kind of contrast with the rich acrylic ink. So again, it's about balancing thick layers and transparent layers. And now I'm coming back with the opaque white and just adding, kind of defining some of these areas, and just trying to break up some of these big blocks of color. And hit and miss. You define a few areas and you abstract a few areas. It's about balancing the two. And I think so far, this painting pretty much has accomplished that. I think this stage is pretty much finished. I think right here I'm just scratching back into the opaque paint to reveal what's underneath, and just to kind of break up the big blocks of white. But so this painting is finished. We'll put the signature on it, and I hope that you're able to discover some useful tools and ideas on how to paint expressively, and how to use some of these materials in your mixed media work. And again, I'm going to reiterate, kind of how I like my work to be. And up close, you can see it makes no sense at all. They're just a bunch of loose, random strokes. And from this distance, you really can't make it out. But when you back up and view it from a distance, here it is finished, you kind of see the subject. So I hope this tutorial was a help for you. I look forward to chatting with you in the forum. I look forward to seeing what you do as with this. And good luck, have fun, and thanks for watching.